Recently, I was planning a family vacation and I was interested in doing a cross country trip on Amtrak. And I found a lot of videos on Amtrak trains and on family bedrooms, but most of them were done by travel vloggers and not by actual families. So I wanted to do a video about my experience on the Capital Limited and the California Zephyr traveling with a 7 and 11-year-old. So, what this video is all about is what we experienced, what lessons we learned, comparing it to the other ways we traveled by flight, and just giving you all the information you need to make an informed decision. So the first question, of course, is what is a family bedroom? On the Amtrak Superliner trains, these are the double-decker trains that run out west, mostly for the long-distance routes. There is one bedroom designated as the family bedroom. It is the largest bedroom on the car. It's at the very end, either the front or the back, depending which way the car is facing, and it runs the width of the car. It has 4 beds in it. 2 of them are kids beds, and they're only about 5 feet long, and I want to emphasize this: you don't want to try to push your luck with a kid. We had a 7 and 11-year-old that worked out fine. My 11-year-old is about 5 foot 5'1", so she was able to comfortably sleep in the smaller beds. But if you got a teenager, you'd be pushing your luck trying to use those for actual sleeping beds. The other 2 beds are adult beds. The first one is a standard single top bunk, a little bit claustrophobic. If you've read Amtrak before in a sleeper, you know what I'm talking about. The top bunk can just be a little claustrophobic because you're close to the ceiling, but it's a big enough bed, long enough to fit anyone. I'm 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and I fit there comfortably. The bottom bed is actually larger than a normal Amtrak bed. My wife and I were able to squeeze in fairly comfortably on that bottom bunk. It spreads out to, I wouldn't say it's a double, but it's definitely larger than a single, and it gives you a little bit of space. During the day, the beds are folded up into a couch, and then there's also a chair that faces the opposite direction. All 4 of us were in there comfortably. We weren't on top of each other. We weren't spread out. We were able to get our luggage in there with us, although once we realized that the communal storage area was pretty safe, we actually moved our clothing luggage out, and we only kept our electronics in the room with us. There's a very small closet that I guess you could hang like 1 or 2 shirts in, but that's about it. It's not a huge space, but compared to like an airplane or a car, you have room to move around, and you can stand up and walk around if you need to. One thing to know is the family bedroom only has one outlet, and that outlet is in a very odd location. It's by the door, about 4 feet off of the ground. It's not a good place to plug anything into, and basically anything you have plugged in kind of hangs. We brought an extension cord because we knew about this in advance. The extension cord had about a 4-foot reach and was to a splitter to a lot of outlets, so we were able to plug in all our devices without any problems. But it is something you want to be aware of and plan for, because it would be very annoying to get there and only have one outlet, and all your kids are frustrated because they can't plug in their various devices, and you're stuck there. Also, it should be noted that at least on our trips, the Capital Limited and the Zephyr, there was no Wi-Fi. I thought this was going to be a problem and that my kids were going to revolt, but honestly, with the train itself, the kind of novelty of having the bunk beds and being able to walk around the train and not kind of being cooped up, I was pleasantly surprised how little device withdrawal they had, particularly compared to the flight later on. Amtrak sleepers also come with some additional amenities, the biggest one being the meals. They do serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so whatever you're on the train, if you're on the train for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the meal is included, and the food's actually pretty decent. On the Capital Limited, we had the flexible dining menu, which is reheated food. It's more like, TV dinners, microwave, but it's actually still pretty good. It was pretty high quality, and there was a good amount of food. We didn't feel like we were shorted. On the Zephyr, they actually give you the traditional dining menu, which is more made to order. The dinner particularly was outstanding. The dinner had appetizers, dinner, and dessert. All 3 were very tasty. Like, I'm not talking 5-star dining, but when you're traveling, compared to airplane food, it's night and day. It was very delicious. We never felt like we were hungry. The kids actually usually took leftovers back to the room with them. You also have access to the bathrooms, of course, and to the showers. The bathrooms, we never had a waiting line. If you get some of the other rooms have bathrooms included in the room. Ours did not. The family bedroom does not have a bathroom in the room, but we were on the bottom floor. There were 3 bathrooms on the bottom floor. We never had to wait for a bathroom, I don't think, the entire time we were on there. It also includes a shower, which I was very skeptical about, but honestly, it had good hot water, decent water pressure. It's a little bit odd to have to, rock back and forth as the train is going, and you don't want to take a shower when the train is in the station, because I think that they change the water out and turn the water off. But there also was soap and towels included in the bathroom. You just had to leave them after you were done for them to wash later. All of that was included in the price of the ticket. Now that we kind of understand what we're getting, let's do the comparisons. And I want to start off with the negatives before I get to the positives. The comparisons we would make are going to be to flying or to driving. And so the biggest negative for either option is the train's going to take longer. It's going to take much, much longer than an airplane. You can go from Chicago to DC in 2 hours. This train was from 4 in the afternoon and you got there first thing in the morning. The Zephyr from Chicago to Utah took 2 days, and you can fly that in a day. That's much longer. It's also much more expensive. The way Amtrak does their fares is the coach price, which is going to be comparable, honestly, to the flight. It's the coach price for each passenger plus the room. The family bedrooms cost over $1,000 for both the Capital Limited and for the Zephyr. That's not cheap. So the trip itself ended up being more than $200 per person, which is a decent chunk of change, and probably more than you're going to get for a flight, and definitely more than you're going to pay driving in terms of gas. And even driving, you're going to get there sooner because you're not going to be stopping at every station. You can plan your route and you can make detours. So those are the downsides. So now that I've told you it costs more and takes longer, you're probably asking yourself, why would I do this? Let's move on to the positives. The first positive you will encounter is not having to go to the airport, go through airport security, or deal with everything that is involved with an airport. When you go to an Amtrak station, most of the Amtrak stations are going to be right in the middle of downtown. So you can probably take your local metro or public transportation down there. And whenever you get off the train, you're going to be near the things you actually want to see. Also, when you walk in with an Amtrak ticket, you walk up to a desk, you show them your ticket, and that's the extent of your security check. If you have a sleeper car, it's even better. When we went to DC, we walked in. My wife did not believe me, so we got there extra early because she was very concerned about having to go through security. We handed them the ticket. They opened the door to the lounge. We went in the lounge, and there was free food and free drinks and couches, and we just sat and ate food and drank and watched TV and relaxed because we were done with our security check. We just had to show them the ticket, and that was all we had to do. When our train came, someone came out, escorted us to our train car, walked us to our room, gave us the overview of everything that is, and that was all that we had to do. Same thing in Chicago. You walk in, you show them your pass, they walk you to the lounge, you can check your bags in the lounge where someone will watch your bags for you. Free drinks, free snack food, and you just wait for your train. It is the easiest process in the world, and it is so different than going to a flight. We had to fly back from California home, and it hit me like a ton of bricks how much I hate going through TSA and how much I hate dealing with all the stress. When we got on the train to Chicago, we stopped to get a deep dish pizza and carried it on to the train. We just stopped, had it in our hands, walked onto the trains with it because that was perfectly fine. There was no, you have to have this much beverages, you have to take off your shoes, you have to go through security, none of that. You just get on the train and you get off of the train. The other thing I would say is, although the trip is much longer than a flight, it's also just more enjoyable. You're not crushed in a seat. You can walk around. The views were great. Even going through the cornfields of Iowa and going through Nebraska was beautiful. And when you talk about, going through the Appalachians when you're on the Capital Limited and going through the Rockies, it is a trip in and of itself. I would say driving has an advantage where you can stop and take a picture, but it also has a disadvantage for the driver in that you can't really enjoy the views because you're always driving. I loved driving down the Pacific Coast Highway. At the same time, I constantly had to watch the road and I couldn't just look off into the distance and look at things. When we were going on the Zephyr through the mountains or going through Harper's Ferry on the Capital Limited, I was just sitting in there, drinking a drink, staring out the window, just completely lost. It was one of the most relaxing experiences I've had in years because I didn't have to think about anything and the views kept coming. Particularly on the Zephyr, I would strongly recommend anyone just fly to Denver, get on the Zephyr, even if it's just a coach ticket, and go over the mountains to Utah as just a vacation trip. It is a beautiful, beautiful scene, and that's something you get from trains. You don't have that on airplanes. Sure, it's very nice to see things in the sky. It is a beautiful view, but you're cramped in a small seat. You can't get up and move around without causing a lot of issues. On the train, you don't have that experience at all. You can walk around, you can stretch. Even in coach class, you have room. And then walking up to the observation car. I mean, imagine if you could just walk around on the airplane up to an observation car and just sit and look around, or walk to a dining car and just look out the window because you wanted to get fresh air or walk around. You also have the fresh air stops where you get to get off the train, take pictures in different parts of the country. It's an enjoyable experience. Nothing about flying to me was particularly enjoyable. It just got the job done. The train itself was part of the journey. Again, very close to driving, with the big advantage being you don't have to drive. Now, what was our experience, again, with a 7 and 11-year-old on the family bedroom? What were the positives and negatives, and what are the things I wish I knew? I was very worried going in about my kids being bored, and that was not really a problem at all. We had a deck of cards, and we had some other things because there is no Wi-Fi on the train. But honestly, the kids were not bored very often. If they started getting bored, sometimes they took naps because the rocking of the train was really relaxing them, and they would take a nap. But my 7-year-old loved just walking around the train, going up to the observation car. The fact that he could move around and do things really took a lot of steam out of him. And he's a high-strung young man. He's not a casual kid. My daughter, who's a little older and very mellow, really just enjoyed taking pictures out the window, walking around. And again, because she could walk around the train, it was a completely different experience on the airplane. When our kids were flying back, we constantly had to get some screens in front of them because they were getting bored, they were getting frustrated. They weren't acting up, but you could tell they were just not enjoying the trip. And so we would, put on a movie or something for them to watch. We had those things available on the train, and we didn't need them because the kids really were interested in the trip. And the train goes fast enough that the scenery does change pretty quickly. Even when you're going through like Iowa and Nebraska, there's rivers, there's creeks, there's something always going on outside that the kids can look at. And especially with the family bedroom, with the two kids, each of them had a window, so they could kind of go back and forth. And if they saw something, they would tell the other kid, and they would kind of go back and forth. And it really worked out much better than I thought. I was very concerned about that. One thing I was concerned about that did actually turn out to be a problem was sleeping on the train. My wife and I had a lot of trouble sleeping on the train for opposite reasons. My wife was having a lot of problem with the jostling of the train. It moved, it kept waking her up. I was having trouble with the sounds and the lights. Normally I can sleep through those things, it doesn't bother me. For some reason on the train it did wake me up, and the jostling was also something where it could be pretty severe. Our kids slept like rocks though, so that might just be my wife and I. That might not be an experience or problem that you have. Our kids were both in the bunk beds, had no trouble at all, slept perfectly fine without any issues whatsoever. Another issue that I was aware of going in, but you should know about and prepare for, is the trains are not going to be on time. They will probably leave the destination on time. They will not arrive at any of the other destinations on time. The Capital Limited got to Chicago an hour late. We ran into it was fire, actually. There was apparently a brush fire, and then we got stuck behind some freight trains. So we got to the station an hour later than we had thought. The Zephyr was a whole other thing. We ended up getting to the Utah 3 hours later than we planned, which in that instance meant we got there at like 2 or 3 in the morning. We knew that was going to happen. We prepared and planned specifically for that purpose. In Utah, we used a car service where you can get a rental car left, and then we had the rental car available when we got out, so we wouldn't have to worry about linking to public transportation or anything like that. But you do have to prepare for the train not getting to a location on time. You don't want to do anything linked up to specific time frames. And also, even though the train stations are generally in the downtown urban areas of most cities, not all train stations are the same. Chicago and DC have cellar lounges and such. When I've gone to Pittsburgh or when we went to Utah, it's just a stop. There's nothing else there. There's no taxi stand. In fact, many of these places don't even have a building or anyone there to talk to you when you arrive. So if you're not doing an end-to-end run, if you're getting off at a specific station, make sure you scout the station in advance. Make sure you plan for all contingencies of arriving early or late so that you're not sitting there stranded anywhere. I would recommend doing end-to-end as much as possible and not trying to get off anywhere in the middle or get on anywhere in the middle, because again, if it arrives late for the passengers, it also arrives late for anyone who's getting on to leave from that location. If anyone in Utah wanted to take the Zephyr that night, it was supposed to get there at 11 and it didn't get there till 2. That's a huge difference. And again, there's a no amenity train station. It's not a good way to travel. All that being said, I don't regret taking the trip at all. In fact, I'm looking forward to setting up another train trip with my family as soon as we can. It was a great experience. The kids really had a great time. At the end of the trip, when I was asking them the parts that they enjoyed the most, they both mentioned the train even before they started talking about things like Disney and Universal Studios. They really enjoyed the train experience, which was something I didn't think would be true when we started. I kind of figured the train was going to be for me and my wife, and then the kids would enjoy the theme park and it would be kind of a trade. But the kids really enjoyed traveling on the train, the whole experience. It was great. I think you just have to look at the train as an experience in and of itself. Look at the train as a ride that will also happen to take you to a destination rather than looking at the train as what you would with your car or with an airplane, which is a mode of transportation. There are some advantages to driving. You can detour. I love driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, which is something we did as part of this trip. But I also was constantly stressed and tired because I had to focus on driving, and that is something you don't have on the train. The trip on the Zephyr is something that I would love to replicate again. We will probably be doing that again as soon as we can, and I would highly recommend this to a family. If you have any questions, specific questions, if you're looking to travel, I please enter in the comments. I'll do everything I can to respond and help. Again, I'm making this video because this video didn't exist when I was planning, and there were things that I wish I had known before I went, and more information specifically about how to travel with a family that I wanted to get out there. So thank you for your time.